For the race weekend, there's a huge amount of work that needs to be done, sometimes 16 or 20 weeks ahead of the race itself. And we have to do a huge amount of simulations to work out which tyres will work best across the race weekend, and we use Racewatch to do just that.
Once we've got that understanding of what the strategy is and what the tyres have to do, we then start engineering the car such that it can achieve that.
We use Racewatch as a tool to review historic data from 2016, 15 and 14 to allow us to understand the strengths and weaknesses. We also run simulations and games within Racewatch to get ready ahead of a race or to prepare for a new set of regulations. It allows us to test ourselves, see which circumstances we need to look out for and be as prepared as possible going into the race.
One of the first things to do is to understand how the tyres are performing on a single lap. We use a tool such as Racewatch to pick out all of the details and subtleties in the data to understand where we're strong and weak relative to other cars, and this gives us a huge amount of insight into how the tyres are performing and how we should approach extracting the performance.
Going into the race, the most important thing to understand is tyre degradation. So we need really good tools to allow us to pick out the relevant laps and filter down to get as accurately as possible a read on the degradation, which will help us decide what to do on a Sunday.
So while this is going on, you've got your own programme. It might be that you start to see someone else has much better degradation, or they've got better performance in some corners, and you need to think about how you skew your own programme or what you might do with your own car to try and address some of those weaknesses. That's where Racewatch is brilliant, because as well as seeing where your car is quick or slow around the circuit, you can view your competition, and you can start to highlight some of the weak corners, because it may be the driver's quite happy with behaviour in a certain corner, but you realise that clearly someone else is able to get a lot more lap time out of the car in those areas of the track. In my role, part of it is just making sure we've got the cars on track at the right time, on the right tyre, in the right modes and free of any traffic.
We use Racewatch to manage the cut-off time in qualifying, to understand which cars are going to go out and therefore what time we need to set to go through. Sometimes we want to run one step harder compound than other cars because it biases towards our race performance, and we use Racewatch to understand how much risk we're taking by doing this and whether or not we're okay to continue.
Racewatch takes so much statistical information, so much information from the weekend to date and an understanding of how the track's evolving, and it takes a huge amount of the stress, the pressure, and in particular the guesswork out of that job. Actually allows the race engineer just to work with the driver and focus on the balance of the car and get everything ready for qualifying 3, which is where they've got to go flat out to do the lap that hopefully puts them on pole.
Formula 1 is extremely tactical, and what we need is tools that allow us to understand whether we can undercut, overcut other cars on any given lap of a race, and also to understand whether we're at risk from them doing the same thing to us.
So going into a Formula 1 race, you've always got a plan for your own strategy, but that plan will change and evolve depending on what everyone else is doing. And where Racewatch is great is it can map out and statistically predict what's going to happen in the remainder of the race so that you can then optimise your plan around that. And that's where it's vital, because you can very early on give the driver a clear idea of what he's fighting for. He might be further down, but he's actually fighting for a podium position.
When you're making a judgment call on a pit stop, you can't rely on guesswork as to where other cars are going to be. Therefore, we use GPS in Racewatch to predict within 1/10 of a second where all the cars are on track and where we would come out. This leads to great racing.
The driver will be going flat out. You'll have turned your power unit up to maximum to try and give you the best chance. But timing which lap you make this call is the critical thing. And it is just one shot. If you get it wrong, then you're stuck there for the rest of the race.
On race weekends, we're constantly pushing the boundaries, and so we rely on having tools like Racewatch to allow us to make the best decisions.